For more on this, let's bring in Marc and Judd Gregg to discuss. Marc, especially as someone who was deeply involved with nominees from the first Trump administration, what would you add? What are your expectations about how this process will actually play out?
Well, thanks, Kelly. I think with all due deference to the senator, I do think that over time what's happened now is that we have more than 1,000 political appointees that require Senate confirmation. And it means that the process is really dragged out, and there's no real way that the Senate gets to know all those nominees. So I think there's some sympathy for the notion of we need to expedite this process. But I think when the president goes about it this way, it's actually counterproductive to his cause, because when you're nominating somebody who's an alleged sex trafficker to be the top law enforcement officer in the land, or somebody who's praising Edward Snowden and Julian Assange for leaking national intelligence that jeopardizes the lives of Americans in the battlefield to run our intelligence agencies, it doesn't create sympathy for the Senate to want to go into recess in the first place to allow any sort of recess appointment. And as you said, if they force a court issue, I think there's several conservative judges from Thomas and Alito and Roberts who are on the record when Obama tried to recess appointments in his administration, who have shown a lot of doubt about the executive branch's ability to do that. And so I think this is part of the natural check and balances that our founders created, that the Senate requires this advise and consent.
Senator Gregg, what would you add to that? And what would you say about the critics' point, which is, look, this nomination process, this confirmation process is really holding things up?
Well, first, I agree with everything Marc said. He's absolutely right on. Second, what can you add to this? The facts are different. The president has a Senate which is Republican and has a fairly strong or good majority of Republicans. The Democrats eliminated the filibuster to try to stop appointments, so you no longer have to deal with a filibuster. So as a very practical matter, the Senate can move very quickly here. And in fact, with the president nominating so many people so quickly, or representing he's going to nominate so many people, they can get all the FBI checks done, all the background checks done long before the president's sworn in. And I would think in the first week, with a strong Republican majority and no threat of a filibuster to slow things down, you could get almost everybody approved who's going to get approved. Now, there are a couple who may not get approved, but the ones who are going to get approved are going to get approved very quickly. And Marc is right. We're taking much too time to fill in the body of the executive branch behind a new president. But again, you've got a Republican Senate that can do this quickly. And if the president and his people can get the names up fast, I think they can be done very quickly. The huge threat here, of course, is to the issue of separation of powers. Madison set this government up so that it would not be an autocracy. He feared autocracy. And we've seen over the last couple of decades that the president has become very imperial, not this necessarily any single president, but they all have. And they've attracted all this huge power to themselves, and they're using regulatory agencies and the deep state to move policies that should have gone through the Congress. So I don't think the Senate wants to step back and give up what is an essential obligation that it has, but more importantly, a constitutional role that it has in approving in advice and consent and not doing recess appointments. So this can be handled quickly. There's no question about it because of the structure on the ground, the facts on the ground. And really, I think this is an unnecessary debate if the president wants to get moving fast. If he were to do recess appointments, by the way, he would run into a constitutional minefield of immense proportions. You've already cited a few of them. And that would just delay things further. And that's of no point.
And that's why the leadership election that the Senate just had becomes so critical, because, you know, Thune won. Rick Scott was nowhere close. And Marc, the reason why we're even talking about this is because you have, I'll call them, I don't know if we call them antagonists. You have people like Scott. I'm not sure if I saw some headlines from the House leader over the weekend who were kind of pointing in this direction of let's go for these recess appointments or kind of force the conditions that would allow for that. Am I misreading the Times, Marc?
I don't think you're misreading at all, Kelly. I do think that President Trump sometimes puts the position out here as a negotiating position and sort of keeping a threat out there to try to encourage the Senate to move faster. So some of this is part of his negotiation. But I do think that, as the senator said, if they actually went down this path of of trying to invoke Article 2, that you could have a much bigger constitutional issue that I think they would lose on. And I don't know if that's the best way to start out your administration, as opposed to putting forward competent nominees that can get confirmed with a Republican Senate, as opposed to, I think, some of the nominees that have been put forward that I think are a counter incentive for the Senate to say in any way that we're going to entertain the notion of recessing to allow the president to make those picks.